Hello and welcome to Don't Be Cinderella. My name is Rowena Kuo, and I am a book publisher and a financial professional. And we have a very special guest with us tonight. We have Hope Bolinger, and she is the acquisitions editor at Endgame Press, the founder of Generation Hope, and the author of 20 or more books. More than 1,300 of her works have been featured in various publications. And when she isn't accidentally writing a book in a week, she loves to hike, model, do theater, and pet her two ridiculous cats. Let's welcome Hope Bolinger.
Hi, thank you so much for
Hello,
having
Hope.
me.
Welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here.
Now, every superhero has an origin story. Can you tell us your origin story?
Yeah, okay, so let me see if I can condense this because it ends up getting a little bit longer each time. So I never imagined I was going to go into writing or publishing. I always thought I was supposed to be like a teacher, and then it turned out I couldn't really teach. So, we weren't going to do that. So what happened was in high school, I had a friend who wrote books. And at the time, I thought she was absolutely crazy because I didn't know how anyone sat down and wrote 300 pages on upwards. So being best friends, I decided to give it a go. I got bit by the bug, and then I decided, okay, I want to do something with this. Although I learned very quickly in high school that it was hard to get a hold of literary agents and publishers. I learned kind of the hard way that the querying process can be a lot. So I made a vow to myself that I would find a way to sneak into the publishing industry, to figure out all its secrets, and then help others get in. So after high school, I went to a publishing specific program at Taylor University. They helped me so much with the writing craft. And one of the most valuable things, honestly, was that they took us to writing conferences. So we were able to meet with industry professionals, get feedback on our manuscripts, and learn what all was needed to do to adjust our writing and learn how to work within the current market. So through having the ability to go to several writing conferences, I was able to tweak my manuscript. I met my publisher at a conference in 2017 and my agent at a conference in 2016. After a lot of polishing and a lot of back and forth, I finally was able to secure contracts with both of them. And then kind of the rest is history. In terms of Endgame, it always was my dream also to be working at a publishing house. And after working at various other publishing jobs, through a God circumstance, I was able to land a job with Endgame Press, having worked with Victoria at a previous job. So that was really cool. And I would love to tease that out more maybe as we kind of go along in this conversation. But that is essentially, I guess, my origin story.
So growing up, you've always wanted to write, it seems that, or you always wanted to be an author. Did you always want, ever since you were a little girl?
I always was writing since about first grade. I was writing stories, but then I think all of us kind of have a story like this. We had a family member or a friend tell us, well, you can't really do anything with that. You can't really make money with that. And I definitely had that experience. I want to say sometime around third or fourth grade, this is also Odin, one of the two crazy cats. I think sometime around third or fourth grade, it was impressed upon me that I would want to get a more practical occupation. And so I kind of stamped that idea out of my mind, although I was always writing something to the side. For a while, I experimented with plays. And then obviously when we hit high school, we decided to go for novels. But yeah, I definitely was always writing. I always was exercising my creative energy in that way. Sorry, I think you went on mute.
You've been a publisher, an editor, you're an author.
Yep, all those things.
And you've been all those things. And what is your favorite role?
I get asked this a lot, and oftentimes I compare the three roles to doing like three completely different sports because they all use different skills. So I know this is like a cop out, but I don't know if I can pick because I love each one for different reasons. I love editing because you can see exactly what an author is trying to do, and you can see that they're trying to do this over here, and they need to get over here, and you kind of help bridge that gap for them. I love doing that because I love just providing guidance to get them there, but knowing they can get themselves there by themselves. As a publisher, it's really fun to see an author present a project to you, something they've worked years on, and you being able to help fulfill that dream for them. That is, there's kind of nothing quite like it. I learned so much through Endgame and also Generation Hope, but I just absolutely love that role. And then as an author, you just get to have so much fun. So I can't pick just because they all use different parts of my brain, but I enjoy all of them. I'm so glad that what I get to do now is a combination of all three.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So so what was your very first book, and how did you get a contract for that?
Yeah, so actually, if we're going by technical standards in terms of a traditionally published book, it actually is this one. And let me tell you the story of this. So this is a World War II veteran's memoir. He lived in the Upland area, which was the same area as Taylor University, and this was published by a university press. And he reached out to our writing department because he wanted someone to essentially ghostwrite his story, put it in print, so his family could have something, and the greater community could have something to learn about his story. So that was definitely a really fun experience. A teacher reached out to myself and the person who co-authored this with me. Her name is Rachel Pfeiffer. And we were able to interview him. He also gave us 300 plus pages of different documents, anything from diary entries to information about different war fronts he had been a part of, and we compiled it within a semester, and it was printed that summer through the university press. So that was technically by I guess publishing standards the first one, but in terms of fiction, it was actually Blaze, which is it's a trilogy. We have Den and Vision here, where I basically take the book of Daniel and stick it in a modern day high school. And this was where I had met Eddie Jones at a conference. He no longer is in charge of Lighthouse Publishing, but at the time he was. And he gave me great tips on how to fix it. Pubboard and I did some rounds back and forth to get it where it needed to go. But it was a super cool experience. I learned a lot through it. But I guess this, in terms of fiction, this is the one that started it all.
Yeah, how long does it take you to write a book?
Okay, so it depends on the book, and let's say we're talking about like a full length type of book, not middle grade, because middle grade I can write a lot faster. If we're talking about a book that's in the 70,000, 80,000, up to 90,000 word range, I've never broken 100 yet. I would say it takes me somewhere between a week to 4 weeks. The longest one took me 45 days. That was Blaze. At the time, I was working multiple jobs over the summer, being a maid of honor in my sister's wedding. There was a lot going on, but usually under a month is where we're going to fall in terms of speed in writing the first draft.
Do you do your own editing, or do you have somebody else do that for you?
I do have a number of beta readers who we're all writers and we swap manuscripts. So I have a number of them look over it. I will self-edit it first before I hand it off to them, but I make sure there are other pairs of eyes on it giving me feedback before I'll get it off to a publisher.
So what do you recommend that new authors or authors who want to be published, where should they start?
Oh goodness. Well, first thing I always say is make sure to finish that book. That's always the best thing. I have so many authors that come to me saying, well, I keep re-editing that first chapter. I can never really get past it. Ignore the editor in your head, or if you have to, edit as you go, but make sure you're making progress. Once you finish that book, I would say let it rest. And then if you can, either get involved in a critique group, do beta swaps, find some way to get feedback on your book. And I don't always say you have to do this, but it was helpful for me because I did have a professional editor go through Blaze at one point. Professional editors are extremely helpful. They know exactly what publishers are looking for. They know what is industry standard, because stories will change and trend every 5 years or so, sometimes less than that. So they will know if you're kind of staying up to date in your genre. But if you can, I would say work with a professional editor. But if that is not financially something that you can do, then definitely go for a critique group. There are tons of great groups out there.
So tell us about critique groups. What are those?
So critique groups are, and they can differ, but usually they are a group of writers, and it can differ on size, but I want to say like 6 to 12 writers usually is kind of what you see, who all write in the same genre. And every time the group meets, everyone presents a certain amount of writing. And sometimes they have word count limits. Sometimes they may do one writer at a time, but they will go through a writer's manuscript and tell them what areas they're doing well and what areas to improve upon in their manuscript.
So your favorite book is of all the things that you've written, what is your favorite genre and what is your favorite book?
See, I can't pick. I know all my answers are gonna be so wishy-washy because they're all my children. I can't choose. There were certain ones that were harder to write than others and certain ones that were really fun to write. So I will say in terms of fun, because I really just can't pick a favorite one, but in terms of fun is a sequel to Dear Hero. It's a superhero chat fiction book. This one's called Dear Henchman. I wrote it with a co-author, and honestly, highly recommend working with co-authors. We could talk about working with the co-authors in this talk, but Dear Henchman was just fun because Alyssa and I just decided to try to make each other laugh the entire book. And so it was kind of fun to try to out funny each other as we were on a Google Doc working on it together. So Dear Henchman was the most fun to write, I think, so far. But in terms of picking a favorite, I can't. And in terms of picking a favorite genre, I also can't, because the genres I vary between are middle grade, young adult, and then sweet adult romance. And I don't know if I can pick a favorite just because they're all different genres, they're all different ages, and they're all fun to write for different reasons.
Where do you get your story ideas from?
So yeah, this is a question a lot of writers will get, and a lot of times we don't really have a solid answer for that. I think a lot of mine will come from what if scenarios. What if our world was just slightly different in some way? Or for instance, in terms of the Blaze trilogy, I got that from an Old Testament class. I was sitting in the class and the teacher had mentioned something that really blew me away. She mentioned that Daniel and his friends would have been in their teen years when they were taken into Babylon. And I never thought of Daniel ever being that young. I always thought he was older. So I thought, okay, he's high school age when this is happening. He is winning over the favor of the king. He's doing really well in their version of school. What does that look like now? So a lot of my stuff does come from what if sort of scenarios, but I wish I could figure out a way to streamline generating ideas, because they'll just kind of come randomly at times, and I have a running list of them anytime one of them pops into my head.
So tell us about Generation Hope. What is that?
Absolutely. So Generation Hope is a publishing imprint that is specifically geared toward young writers and young illustrators. So as of October, we've opened submissions for any writer who is between the ages of 10 to 24, or illustrator who's between the ages of 10 to 24. And honestly, my heart behind the imprint, because I talked with our publisher over it, we prayerfully made this decision to get it started, was when I was in high school, I noticed there just were not many opportunities for young writers. Thankfully, there are more opportunities now than there were at the time. I just wanted to open up an avenue for the next generation, just because I think they have so many great ideas and I would love to see them brought to life.
So how did you even get your foot in the door? I mean, just by going to college and being in that particular program at Taylor, you were able to get opportunities? Because people are nowadays, we just have a plethora of writers who don't even know where to start.
Oh yeah, I would say there are multiple ways to get your foot in the door. You don't necessarily have to get a specific college degree to do so. I would say writing conferences are a bountiful resource, and I would highly recommend going to at least one of those if you can. What was actually helpful for me was doing a lot of unpaid internships with publishers. Sometimes they would require, maybe even 5 or 10 hours each month, nothing like a huge time commitment. But participating on pub boards, helping with launch teams was really helpful for me, not only to have an insider look in the industry, but also for them to remember my name. Remember, okay, Hope did great work here. So if she submits a work to us, we're going to remember her name and remember she was pleasant to work with if we enjoy this book that she has sent to us, maybe we can collaborate with her on this as well. So I would say there are multiple ways to get into the industry. Honestly, it never hurts to ask. If you reach out to a publisher and ask, is there anything that you're in need of? I'm sure they will have something that they can definitely send your way. But that was helpful. Editing was helpful. Getting into freelance editing and then eventually getting the job at Endgame was also another way to kind of get your foot in the door in the industry. So I would say there are multiple different intersections to jump into publishing.
Okay, so then you're a publisher and now you're also a model. How did you get into modeling?
Yeah, so I only kind of do stuff in the Northeast Ohio area, so nothing crazy. I'm in all bridal runways and shoots, but I'm on a number of audition pages in the Northeast Ohio area. So myself and my best friend, we were rooming together at the time. We saw a audition listing for a photo shoot, so we went to it. The woman there enjoyed kind of what we brought to the audition, but she couldn't use us for that particular shoot, but she told us to come back for the next runway audition. We did a terrible job, but for some reason she saw something in us and she cast us for the next show. So thankfully we've been able to do a lot of different runways and shoots with them. And that's been a super enjoyable experience. That's something I always wanted to do back in high school, but definitely did not have the confidence to do so. And also, I don't think I had the time to do so. So I'm excited to be able to jump into it kind of now.
So how are you financially supporting yourself through your creative talents?
Absolutely. So I am on full-time salary with Endgame. So that's kind of the majority of what we're seeing coming in. Obviously, book royalties are helpful for that as well. And also I'm a freelance writer. So I frequently will contribute Christian living articles to crosswalk.com and sister publications. So that is another way. And then some theater gigs here and there do offer some payment as well. So, but the majority will come from the full-time position with Endgame.
And so you're doing pretty much an Endgame is a full-time job. That's something that you actually go to an office to do, or do you work from home?
I do work from home. I want to say everyone who is on staff at Endgame is working remotely. We will meet up for conferences from time to time. I think our next one we are meeting up in person is either January or February, but we are all working remotely, which is honestly really helpful. I'm very productive when I am at home. So I know we're kind of scattered a little bit all over the country as well. So it's kind of cool to be able to work in this way. I know it's definitely more of a newer work style than maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but I'm definitely blessed to be able to do that for sure.
And what do you see in the next 5 years? What are your goals?
So as a writer, or as Endgame, or just kind of in general?
In general.
Oh, I mean, that's a good question, because a lot of times how to answer this question is wherever the Lord will lead me, because sometimes I'll make plans and then he will completely surprise me with what he has planned. I would love to continue writing and pursuing publication. I, at one point, honestly would love to run a theater. I love theater, and I have many ideas for directing different shows. What else would I love to do in the next? I'd love to explore film a little bit more. That's something I haven't dipped my toes into enough, but something I think would be really cool to do so. But honestly, I know this is terrible from a planning perspective, but I'm open to so many different things, just because if you asked me 5 years ago what I thought I was going to do, I definitely would not have predicted this. So I have no idea, but I'm excited to see what does happen.
What's a typical day like for you?
Yeah, so at Endgame, I actually have 3 main responsibilities, and I'm going to be hopping between these 3. So I'll kind of break them all down. So I am the acquisitions editor. One of them, Victoria, is another one. We also have another couple for different imprints that we have. So what is involved in that is I'll be reading every single submission that comes through our inbox. I will be evaluating it along with our team, and we will make a decision as to whether it is a good fit for us or whether it is not a good fit for us. In terms of the editing side, because I also do some editing at Endgame as well, I am in charge of content editing the majority of our projects. So that'll be looking for big picture areas and making sure there are no plot holes, making sure the organizational structure is solid. So I'll be doing that. And then I'm also the managing editor, which means essentially I make sure that the books are running according to their individual schedules and we're hitting every single deadline that is needing to be hit. And there are a lot of things that are packed into that, but my day to day usually is doing something or all of the 3 roles within that.
And do you make your own hours, or you have set hours that you're supposed to be on the clock?
So what Victoria and I have arranged is essentially, as long as I'm putting in 8 hours each day, it doesn't matter which 8 hours they are, but as long as 8 hours are being logged each day, amounting to a full-time job. What I prefer to do is usually 7 to 3. My most creative energy happens in the morning. So the sooner I'm able to wake up and get to work, I am able to produce a lot more work than I think later on in the afternoon. But we're working 40-hour weeks, basically.
What is something you learned about publishing that you wished you knew going in?
Okay, can I probably will answer a couple things. First of all, there are so many writers, and that is something I did not realize. I remember in high school just being so upset that I was either getting form rejections or just no response whatsoever. It made me really upset that there was no personalized feedback, with the exception of a few people. And then when I got into agenting, because I did literary agenting before my role here, I realized just how many submissions people get. So as an agent, every single year I got 10,000 submissions. So for doing the math, that's a lot of reading submissions and making quick decisions for very few slots on the roster. So that is something I wish I would have known. Something else I wish I would have known is there's a lot that is outside of the publisher's control, and that the publisher does have your best interests at heart. Because I think when you're looking at it from an author's perspective, sometimes you won't hear from them for a while. Sometimes books will go up for pre-order later than they're supposed to. And when you're kind of looking at it from the publisher side, you see that there are shipping delays, that there are paper shortages, that there are a lot of things that no matter how much you try to anticipate, sometimes you can't get ahead of some of those things. So that was really helpful to know. And also something I learned is that also the editor has your best interest at heart. I think when you get started in publishing, your first reaction anytime you get critical feedback is to kind of flinch and hug your manuscript tight and not want to change anything. But what I've learned through working with a variety of editors is they really do have your best interests at heart, and they're trying to get the story to be the best shape it can be before it gets to the reader.
Now, tell us about branding, and should an author stick to one genre, or should they diversify their creative talents? What is your opinion on that?
No, this is a good question, because I feel like branding for me, I'm constantly learning about. I feel like I've never fully made it. In terms of branding, I feel like it's constantly shifting. I would say branding doesn't necessarily have to be genre specific, because I'm seeing authors like Caroline George, which highly recommend reading any of her books if you get a chance. She's, hopping between different genres and doing really well in all of them. I would say branding honestly comes down to who are you as a person, and is this someone who I enjoy following? Is this someone whose content I feel like is helpful to me? And then when you release a book or when you release some product, they will think, okay, I've enjoyed everything I've seen from this person so far. I'm going to give this book or this product a try. That's why I'm seeing branding shifting too, is a lot of people are buying books because they know the person or they have interacted with the person's content. But that is also something that I know is always shifting, something that I should always kind of keep a keen eye on, because social media is always changing. And so we have to pay attention and kind of follow along with it.
What kinds of factors do you put into decision making when you're willing to take a book, or willing to give it a rejection?
This is such a good question. And I love asking any editor this question, because I know everyone has amazing responses to this. I would say I look for a couple big picture things. The first thing is I look at the idea. Is it a type of idea where you're kind of kicking yourself for not thinking of this idea, an idea that would just be a very high concept sort of idea? That's usually the first thing I look for, because I, as a publisher, have to know how to pitch this book. I'm often writing the back cover copy. I'm often writing promotional materials for this. So is it something that I can get behind and pitch and know that a lot of interest is going to be generated from it? Second thing I look for is the writing. Sometimes as an editor, you can tell when the writer is so close, but the voice just isn't quite there yet. Sometimes you can tell when people are telling a little bit too much rather than showing, or whether they're not necessarily reading in their genre as much as they should be. So you look for the writing, and oftentimes you'll first ask for a sample and then you'll ask to read the whole thing. And then the author. I often, even if the book is really good and the idea is outstanding, if the author seems like they are someone who does not have a growth mindset, who may not be receptive to feedback, that will tell me that it most likely is not necessarily a good fit for us. But if the author is definitely receptive to feedback and definitely willing to grow and learn, that is someone I definitely want to work with for a long amount of time. And I know a lot of times we get asked the platform question: how much platform do we expect as a publisher? We don't necessarily put a number on it, but we definitely like to see that it is there and that you are working on ways to grow it. That is usually the biggest thing we look for.
It's so important for authors to be coachable and to be teachable, to be open to criticism. How do you give a critique? What kinds of things do you put into a critique when you're trying to help an author improve?
Well, absolutely, especially because when I do the content edit, I will give them a full page or more of feedback in terms of what I think they did well and what there is to improve upon. So it can totally depend on the book. I usually try to have as many positives as there are negatives, because I know a lot of times our eyes will dart straight to the negatives. So I want to make sure that there are plenty of things noted about what they did well. But some items that I typically will mention, is the dialogue realistic? Is in terms of nonfiction, because we take on both fiction and nonfiction, is the book well structured? Is it well organized? In terms of nonfiction, are you presenting all viewpoints fairly, even if there's a certain viewpoint you're sticking to? Are you addressing any opposition to your viewpoint? In fiction, are the characters acting in character? Are they, or are you just trying to kind of force them to act a certain way because you have certain plot points you need to be hitting? Is everything organic? I mean, the list can go on. There are so many things you definitely can point out in that critique. A lot of big picture things, but I do try to recognize, especially if we take on an author, I'm editing them, we see the quality in your work, we see that you have a great book, and we're trying to get it to the best spot possible.
And when you're writing your own books, what obstacles do you encounter in getting them published?
No, this is a great question. I would say, especially because right now my agent is trying to hit some bigger publishers right now. And I would say oftentimes some of the biggest obstacles we're running into, because we're trying to get a middle grade into a bigger publisher, is either the idea is not necessarily generating interest enough, or that they're just out of slots in the year. Because something else that I learned as a publisher is that a publisher has a certain number of slots for the year. When I first got started writing, I was under the impression that, they just kind of take on as many as they want. And financially, that's not feasible. So sometimes even I, as a publisher, have had to turn down people not because I don't love their book, but just because we don't have room for it. Some obstacles I've also run into is maybe they enjoy your book idea, but they've already taken on something similar. And so they can't have competing titles at the same imprint. We've always gotten great feedback on books. And whenever I get personalized feedback from a publisher, my agent and I will work through it to make sure the book is reflecting what improvements they're looking for. But you can get anything from, we love this book idea, just don't have room for it right now, to sometimes they will give form feedback. That can happen as well, even when you're agented. Sometimes you just don't find out why. So I think a lot of the obstacles is just patience and waiting for the right door to open, and then fixing the work when it's needing to be fixed.
What genres do you look at?
So, okay, so I'm going to break down Endgame and I'm going to break down Generation Hope. At Endgame specifically, we take on a lot of genres. We take on picture books, and both in the fiction and nonfiction categories. We take on fiction in pretty much every genre except for speculative, fantasy, sci-fi, horror, and biblical fiction. Those right now we are not acquiring, and we do have these listed on our site. In terms of nonfiction, we've taken on Christian living, devotionals, and then we have taken on some more self-help books that go toward general market, but are often written from Christian perspectives. In terms of Generation Hope, what we are currently acquiring is chapter books, middle grade, and young adult from the writers who submit it. I believe we are also open to adult titles if they're maybe written by authors who are more in like the 21 to 24-year-old range, but we are focused a little bit more on the children's titles for that. Endgame also takes on young adult and middle grade.
And what is your readership?
In terms of general market or Christian market, or?
Yes, yes. How do you get the book into the hands of the readers?
Yeah, so Endgame will have books that specifically are for Christian market, and then we do have books that are specifically for general market. There are a number of avenues that we use to get into the hands of readers. I know we're constantly exploring other ones. So that's a good question. Honestly, I wish I could get Victoria on here, or our publicist, because she would be able to illuminate more of those. But what I will say in terms of any publisher is publishers are constantly trying to find new ways to help books get into the hands of readers, whether it is contacting the small press email for Barnes and Noble to try to get them into all the stores, or whether it is developing lists of schools to get your books into school libraries. There are a number of different avenues we are exploring. And I think the really cool thing is we have a lot of authors who are really excited to market their books as well, which can often be really helpful. I know we have a lot of authors going into small stores and businesses in their local areas and commissioning a number of books with the store owners.
What resources do you recommend for new authors?
There's so many. Jane Friedman's blog is one I definitely highly recommend. I love Writer's Chat that is hosted by Serious Writer. Every single week, a group of authors will get on and they will talk about something publishing related, often genre specific. That's great. Steve Lobby's blog is always a really good resource to check out. Any of the Writer's Market Guides, Writer's Digest, those are always really good resources. Those are the first ones that come to mind, and ones I definitely circle back to several times.
What is some advice that you would give to new authors?
Okay, yes, a lot. I love answering this question. So some piece of advice that I would give, the first piece of advice I would give is have patience. I think a lot of us expect publishing to move a lot faster than it does. I think we want even our voice, our own craft to be there. And a lot of times it takes years to develop. I believe it was Stephen King, by maybe misquoting, said it takes about 1 million words to develop one's own writing voice. And if we're doing the math here, that's a lot of writing. And of course, that's not always the case, but definitely it takes a lot of practice. So definitely continue to practice, continue to work on your craft, and continue to read from multiple different publishers, because it's great market research and it gives you an idea of what readers are reading right now in your specific genre.
You mentioned reading. What books do you enjoy reading?
So many. Right now, I'm on a middle grade kick. I have a number of spooky middle grades because we are in October right now. So they're kind of sitting there staring at me because I know I need to get to them. So middle grade has recently been the one I've absolutely loved. It just tends to be very pure and well done storytelling. I always tend to also gravitate to young adult as well. Young adult honestly was what had sparked my interest for writing and reading back when I was a teen. And I just love kind of some of the issues that YA tackles. YA tends to tackle very big picture types of issues. So I would say those are the two genres I tend to gravitate toward. There may be genres that I will read from time to time that are outside of those, but those are definitely my favorites to read.
So do you write the book first, then pitch it, or do you pitch on premise?
This is a great question because up until this year, I was not able to do that. Most publishers would require me to have the full done, a polished full done, before being able to have it contracted. And that is still the case with some of the publishers I work with. They do need to see the full manuscript. Even if we have a great working relationship, they probably still need to take a look at it. There are some publishers, though, that I do work with now that have accepted books on concept. And what happens with that is oftentimes I'll give them a list of about 10 of them, and I'll kind of let them pick some of their favorites. Then I'll send them a full synopsis, some writing samples. And yeah, so that is what I will often do in those cases. I'll ask them what else they need to see. So it can totally depend on the publisher. I would say if you are a writer getting started, they will, unless you're a nonfiction, you will be required to have the completed manuscript done in most cases. So it's just helpful to have that whole thing done. And then, yeah, I would say until I got kind of closer to the 20 book range, as Odin can tell you, I did not, I wasn't able to kind of pitch anything more than unless I had the full available.
So what are you working on now?
So I just finished a Phantom of the Opera inspired murder mystery that's going to be published with Quill and Flame. So I'm setting that aside, and then we're going to work it through self edits and beta swap edits before we get it to the publisher. And then I am waiting for my co-author. We do a number of romances together. So the fourth romance in the Roseville Romances series, we are working on right now. We're about halfway through. I need her to write a couple more chapters to get us halfway through. And the minute she is there, we're going to finish the second half of the book. And then I'm going on a brief break because I had to write 6 books this year. And then after that, I am going to write a modern day Esther story come February range. So that is the current plan.
And are these books all contracted already, or
they are? I'm playing catch up with my contracts right now. So yeah, so they are all under contract. So yes, I have to finish writing them. So deadlines have been very good motivation to get books done, because before last year, I usually would only write 1 to 3 books a year, and now we are consistently writing 6 books a year. So we probably need to slow down a little bit, but yes, so they are all under deadline, under contract.
So how do you juggle everything?
Oh goodness. Yeah, no, this is a good question. And okay, so I think part of it is that I can write pretty fast. So I can usually write about 2,000 plus words per hour. And what that stemmed from was when I got started writing for Crosswalk, I got really used to doing about 1,500 word articles in an hour. So I just kind of got used to having to turn around work really fast. So that is part of how I can do it quickly. Writing a book in a month can also help the process go by pretty fast. But yes, I would say being able to write in spurts and not self-editing until I finish that first draft is what is helpful to me personally. But I know not every writer is geared that way. What has been suggested to me in the past and what I kind of do is something called a writing sprint, which means you kind of just write what comes to mind and just don't edit yourself as you're doing so, and you're able to write a lot of content in between. And then the beauty of edits is you get to go back and fix it all. So that is part of what is how I'm able to get it done quickly. But I will say after this year, I'm hoping to be able to scale back a little bit in terms of how many projects we're taking on, but we'll see what happens.
So do you do an outline first, or do you just sit at the computer and just type it out and get surprised with the reader?
Okay, so this actually can play into why I'm able to do it a little quicker. I am an outliner. So and something that I think a lot of people don't realize, because I think people can get down on themselves for, oh, I've been spending a good couple years on this book. Part of my writing process is thinking about an idea for several years. I have several ideas that are not written yet, but I have thought about throughout the years. So there is a lot of pre-writing that goes on. And then when something goes under contract, I will form an outline, and it's usually a little bit more of a skeletonic outline. I try to have room for when the characters decide to fight against me in my plans. So it's usually more skeletonic outline to get us started with. And as I'm writing chapter by chapter, we make it fleshed out a little bit more as we're going along. So the characters still do surprise me and hopefully the reader, but the outline is helpful in terms of speed and in terms of staying on track.
So you know ahead of time who you're going to kill.
I do.
Or does it come as a surprise? Do you cry when it happens?
I do. It depends. Like, it depends if I'm emotionally invested in the character, because some of my characters are just mean. So I don't know if I cry in those circumstances. But yes, I usually know, although sometimes they may trick me. I'm like, okay, apparently this one is not going to die and it's going to be someone else. So that does happen sometimes. So I do always try to be open in terms of changes, making sure we can pivot and change things as we go along. But usually I will know how a book ends when I get it started. I have pantsed a few books. I decide with every single book, I try to challenge myself in some way, just to kind of give myself a little extra hurdle, because why not? So there were a few books I definitely did just sit down and write. And it was an experience I may not do again, but we tried it.
So you would recommend like joining, because you and I have a book together, and and this is something I never really thought of before, but it's a great thing to do, is to get with a group of people, 2 or 4 people, and write a book.
Oh yeah.
and it becomes a collaborative endeavor, and you keep each other accountable. And there's less of a strain to get the book published on your own. There's that group momentum.
Oh yeah.
And that's something that you basically do a lot, is find somebody to co-author a book with, and go and write it and then go and pitch it.
Oh yeah. Yes. Okay. So I could talk about co-authoring and also the idea of anthologies, because I highly recommend any author, especially if an author is getting into the industry, look at anthology calls. Short stories are severely underrated, and they're hard to write, but they're fun to write. So in terms of co-authoring, I really lucked out when I met Alyssa. Alyssa was in the same professional writing program I was at Taylor. We collaborated on a number of projects for class and realized we would be a really good fit for one another. And then we decided to give a few books a go. And that has been a really fun process. I often compare it to tennis, because I played tennis back in the day. And it's like having a doubles partner, someone there to encourage you, to get some of the shots that you can't get, to do half the work with you. And so I love working with co-authors. And then kind of conversely, also in the idea of anthologies, I'm in a number of short story anthologies that are compiled by, anywhere between 6 to 10 plus authors. And that's really cool, because not only do you get to read a variety of different tones and styles, but there is, as you mentioned, that accountability, that marketing push, that encouragement. So for any author who is jumping into this industry or wanting to try something new, definitely do something collaborative. It's really fun.
Where do you get your inspiration from, and your energy? Where do you get your energy from?
Okay. So in terms of the energy, because I think inspiration comes from a lot of things. It comes from really good writing. It comes from interacting with really good writers. If you don't have a writing community, definitely get plugged into one, because there's something really inspiring by seeing authors have wins, by seeing authors make it. It tells you that I too can find a way into this industry. In terms of energy, it's interesting, because I deal with something that actually saps me of energy every single day. It's like a circulation thing where blood isn't pumping correctly. So I could be passed out sometimes. I could be dealing with migraines. So I know going into each day that I only have a limited amount of energy, which is helpful for me to know boundaries and know when I have to say no to things. but it's also helpful for me to get that push to, okay, I have limited energy, so we're going to utilize it well now. And so I think having a lack of energy has given me energy to kind of do this stuff, just kind of knowing that um, I may kind of hit a wall at a certain point. So I usually try to get a lot of content done early so I can kind of cross it off my list for the day. But also, I mean, I'm going to throw it to the Lord. The Lord obviously is giving me the strength that I need to do all this stuff, because obviously apart from him, I would not be able to do that. So I would say the majority of energy or strength or inspiration would come from him.
How are you able to recognize your limitations?
So, I mean, my body will sometimes give me some warning signs that we have to put a pause on some things. Usually it'll give you a little bit of a warning before you either pass out or get really dizzy or just get a migraine. So my body will tell me. I often also know I have to just get lots of sleep. I have to exercise regularly, eat healthy, just really take care of myself. But it also has trained me to say no to a lot of things, to know when I can't do one more assignment on top of everything else, because I definitely am the type of person who likes to say yes to everything. So I have to kind of learn how to say that to certain projects and certain things. But I don't know really kind of how to explain it, but I often can tell mentally when someone asks me if I want to take something on, whether or not I would be able to do it given the energy I'm feeling at the time. But yes, I don't know if that helped explain that, but that is usually a good indicator for me.
So what advice do you give to authors who are trying to juggle everything? How do you develop that discernment on when to say no and when to go full on and just take it and just run with it?
No, yeah. So in terms of an author who is juggling a lot, not sure what to say yes to and what to say no to, if you are a Christian author, I'd say definitely pray about it, because a lot of times discernment in that is helpful. I would throw it out to a number of author friends too. I have a lot of author friends who yell at me if I take on too many things, and also operate by the principle that when you say yes to something, you are saying no to something else. So make sure the thing that you are saying yes to is something that you are very passionate about, that's something that you really believe is worth investing your time. Because as an author, when I got started in the industry, I got a lot of no's. And so for me, yeses were rare, they were really treasured. And now, thankfully, I've developed a lot of connections. I'm grateful for the fact that I am able to work with a variety of people, but I now have to tell myself, okay, although these are amazing opportunities, something else can come along, something else may come along, and will I have the opportunity to be able to do that in addition to this?
You had mentioned you'd received no's. What recommendation do you give to authors when they receive a rejection?
The first thing I would say is no, it's not personal. I can feel personal, but know that publishers and agents hate saying no. We know the heart and effort that goes behind the story, and we wish we can say yes to everyone, but just financially or in the terms of an agent, time-wise, may not feasibly be able to work with your specific manuscript. I would also say pay attention to personalized feedback, because if people are giving you personalized feedback, it usually means a couple things. It often means that you are very close, because if someone is taking the time to give you personalized feedback, it means that they see the potential in your manuscript. It's not quite there yet, but it could be there soon. And apply it, definitely apply it, especially if you're getting consistent feedback. Definitely apply that to your manuscript, show that you are coachable and that you are able to apply the feedback that you are given, would be the best advice I'd give. And know that rejection does happen to everyone. I want to say at this point, I've had hundreds at this point. And certain books that are contracted now, I want to say one of them that was agented got like a good 30 something rejections before the right publisher was found. So know that even when you do get an agent, even when you do get that first book contracted, that rejections still happen to everyone. I know authors with 100+ books out in the market with millions of sales under their belt who still get rejected on a regular basis. So no, it does happen to everyone, and that you're not alone in this.
That's so encouraging, because you could just receive one rejection and say, okay, I'm going to give up. I'm not going to be an author. I'm not going to be a writer. It's not for me. So that's really a strong word of encouragement not to give up.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, because I'll see on Twitter threads all the time. Someone will say, "Well, I've gotten 5 rejections total on my manuscript, so I'm just going to pull it and not submit it anymore." You do see that happen, and it makes me wonder how many authors out there were just so close, or if they'd, had a little bit more patience, or maybe just rework the manuscript one more time, whether they would have found the forever home for their book. So yeah, definitely have patience, and please don't give up. You were given the story for a reason, and so keep at it.
So how do we reach you, Hope?
So the best way I would say is head to my website, which is hopebolinger.com. All my social media will be listed there, and there is a website contact form that can be found at the bottom of the home page. So that would be probably the best way I would suggest people can reach me.
Are you taking submissions openly, or are they only solicited submissions?
At the moment, I believe Endgame for the month of October is open to unsolicited manuscripts. Ordinarily, we'll only take on agented manuscripts, or if someone meets us at a conference. I think only for the month of October are we doing unsolicited manuscripts, but all of our submission guidelines can be found online at the Endgame Press website. We'll list everything we're looking for in submission, what we're needing to see in a proposal, and everything else, which is a good point to also mention that every single publisher is going to have different submission guidelines. So similar to applying for a job, make sure to personalize every submission material that you give to that specific publisher.
And you are a traditional publisher?
We are a traditional publisher. We do have a hybrid imprint called Fusion. And also we do have another hybrid imprint called Legacy Press, both of which do have information on Endgame Press's website. But I personally work with the traditional imprints at Endgame specifically.
Can you just give us a quick update on what is traditional versus self-publishing?
Absolutely. So traditional publishing is when a publisher upfronts the cost to publish your book, and sometimes we'll give an advance for that. So at Endgame, we do have a small advance that we give to writers, and we'll give royalties to an author once they earn back that advance. And then obviously we'll upfront the other costs, such as cover, interior edits, everything else that goes into the book project specifically. Hybrid publishing is where an author will pay a publisher for certain services for their book, such as editing, such as the book cover, such as formatting, and the publisher will publish the book for them. A hybrid publisher is also selective about which books they will take on. They often will have a pub board as well that will review the projects to determine if it's a good fit for the house. And at Endgame specifically for our hybrid imprint, we often will work with speakers. That usually is our particular niche, is speakers who often want to have a companion book to the various talks or conferences that they will give. A book that they can sell at the back of the room is usually the type of author that Fusion will partner with. And in terms of self-publishing, apart from a publisher, an author can on their own hire editors, hire book cover designers, and everyone else involved, and they themselves can also publish the book on their own. So those are the 3 different types of publishing that you will see in the market. All of them, I've seen authors have success with all of them. No one way is the right way necessarily. They all have benefits and downsides to each of them.
What would you say is a typical financial investment per book, whether it's through a publisher or self-publishing? If an author were to say, okay, I want to self-publish my book, how much money do I need to actually do that?
So this is a great question, because I know it will differ from author to author. I've asked a lot of authors who kind of went indie what the cost was. I would say in terms of financial investment, no matter which route you go, It probably, if you want to do it well, it probably will take a bit of an investment. Usually, if we're calculating it all together in terms of book cover, in terms of making sure the book is formatted nicely, in terms of ISBNs, um, it can really vary. I would say at least a couple thousand at minimum if you're kind of going with bare essentials, but probably is going to be a little bit closer to the $5,000 to $10,000 range if we're not including illustrations or anything. All to say that a book is quite the investment. And if a traditional publisher does offer to take on your book, they are usually investing thousands of dollars into that book. So that is them telling you as an author, I believe in you, I believe in this book, and I do think this book is going to do well in the market to recuperate those costs that are going into the book that we're taking on. I don't know. What have you discovered as well?
Yes, that is typical, between $2,500 and $5,000.
Yeah.
Depending on, again, illustrations and boutique services, and how much editing a book will need. And I think that it's important for authors out there to make that realization that when a publisher takes their book on, they are really making an investment. And very few books actually make back what is put into them. Right. So it's a big responsibility for the acquisitions editor, for the publisher, to pick a book that will have a return of some kind to keep the house afloat. and to keep the authors happy and to be a success. And I think that oftentimes authors, they might not see that until they try to self-publish, and then they see how much money is required to actually publish a book.
Oh yeah. I mean, honestly, that was something, as an author going into it, I'm like, why won't they just take on my book? Why won't they do this? But when I was able to see the insider look, I realized they invest a lot into this. And so if someone does take it on, they are definitely going to invest quite a bit into it, meaning they do believe in the story, and do believe in the author. But it definitely was cool to see it from the insider perspective, to understand that rejections really aren't trying to be mean or trying to be personal. They just are not able to invest in every book that comes into the inbox.
Okay, so is there anything that you want to advertise in the last few minutes? Anything you want us to know?
Sure. So we do have a couple things going on in October. Something that actually happened is sometimes when a publisher goes under, you have to figure out what happens to my book next. And that did happen to myself and Alyssa with Dear Hero and Dear Henchman. We were with a publisher who unfortunately went down during the pandemic. And so we ran into a wonderful publisher who had believed in the book since the beginning. She was an endorser for them. We asked her if she'd be willing to take them on, and she did. She gave them new covers. We worked through the interior together. We did some additional edits. And Dear Hero and Dear Henchman just re-released with Love to Read, Love to Write publishing. So we are so excited for this. And so if you love all things superhero, you love chat fiction types of stories told all through text messages, we definitely highly recommend these adorable, quirky superhero romances. And then additionally, happening in October is you and I, as well as two other authors, are Getting Past the Publishing Gatekeepers book that is releasing. It's crazy to think that is here. How many days out are we? I feel like we're really, really close. We're pretty close, yeah. And so if you've ever wondered how to win the hearts of individual gatekeepers in publishing, from agents to publishers to editors to readers, we have authors from all four of those camps contributing to this book and giving you the best and most up-to-date tips on how to break into the publishing industry. It's going to be available in ebook and print, and I also believe in audio, which is exciting for me because I have yet to have an audiobook yet. So that is exciting for me. So those are the two upcoming ones. And then come November, if you like all things Christmas romance, Curtain Call is the book for you. Involves a playwright and an actress trying to save the town theater through a Christmas show. So that is what is on the docket right now for the next 2 months.
Well, I want to thank you, Hope, for being with us. And, it's just been a pleasure. You are such an inspiration, being so young and vibrant and having all this energy and being so successful in 6 books a year. That's a lot on top of all the other projects that you're doing.
Oh, yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for having me on here. It's been, I love having these discussions, and I'm so happy that you have these discussions available. I hope this was inspirational for listeners. And I'm so grateful to be on here today.
Thank you very much. And that's it for tonight's episode of Don't Be Cinderella. Please go ahead and create your own future and live happily ever after.